Thanks for joining us today on By Subject, a Silicon Slopes brand and marketing podcast. I'm your host, Peter Stevenson, and in this episode, I had a chance to sit down with John Perry, Creative Director at Marq, formerly Lucid Press. Welcome, John Perry.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being out here on the By Subject podcast here at Silicon Slopes. So, love to get started with your background. So, tell me a little bit about how you got started in design, what that first sort of role was. Did you go to school, kind of where you grew up, that kind of stuff.
Cool. Yeah. So I would say for me, everything kind of started with my mom. Like, my mom was a total badass. She was a single mother of 3 boys, and our father passed away when I was 6. My older brother was 8. My younger brother was 4. So she had to find a way to keep us all occupied. And for me, it was always art. Like, I totally got lost in the world of Stan Lee and Marvel comic books, and I probably filled sketchbooks and drawn Wolverine, Spider-Man, and Gambit over 10,000 times. And that kind of translated a lot into fine arts. And then she really always pushed me into, whatever I wanted to do. It was nothing forced on me, but there would literally be figure drawing classes or painting classes, and she would drive me a half an hour away to get into those things, because she could see it was something that I was good at, and it kept me in a good headspace. So, I still remember vividly middle school, 8th grade, the iMac came out, and my mom bought one for me. And my mom was, she was a school teacher, so that was big purchase for her.
Wow.
And for me, I was like, man, this thing is awesome. Apple computer, bold, colorful, beautiful. And it was a way for me to take what I was doing in sketchbooks and canvases and put it into a digital medium. And that was kind of the turning point for me when I was like, man, design is going to be the thing that I do.
And so did you pull up Adobe products and start playing around with the Adobe suite?
Yeah, right away. So I was fortunate where, again, my mom pulled me out of middle school that I was going to in my hometown and took me to her middle school, which were basically both of them 45 minutes, half hour outside of New York City in the suburbs. And they had a really good art department where you could do that in school. So they had a computer lab filled with Macs. So I got to use the Adobe products in school. And then I had a computer at home. So I was able to work with the Adobe products right away, super early in my career.
Amazing. And so as you, sort of grew up through high school, did you go to college for graphic design?
I did, yeah. So I basically, in high school, I was pretty advanced. So I was in all honors classes, and I was able to get rid of all my gen eds right away and then switch mainly into art. I did nothing but art classes junior and senior year, and got into AP art classes. So I was literally taking, probably 6 art classes, gym, and then I was leaving school at, 1 o'clock. So I ended up going to University at Buffalo, and I majored in communication design, which was the first year they were doing that program, and it was early stages of UX. So you basically get your base in fine arts, and then you translated that to digital user experience website, and then a mix of advertising and some of the psychology sides, color theory and art history and things like that.
And what year was that you graduated from college?
So this would have been 2005.
2005.
Yeah.
Real great time to come out of school.
Yep.
Yeah. So tell me about the first gig. Where did you land? Did you come out to Utah right then, or did you wait a couple of years?
So I didn't. I worked in New York City for a couple of years. I did a couple internships. First one was at a post-production house called Nice Shoes, and man, New York definitely gave me the roots of everything that I have today, because everything was so hard, fast paced, and really old school. The post-production house, I was getting coffees and dinners and doing all this grunt work to be able to do a little bit of motion design. And that was the treat, the carrot on stick.
Yeah.
For all of us, we worked in a shipping room, and we hustled, and we probably worked 14, 16-hour days. And then out of school, I went to work for a guy named David Canner. So this guy played for the New York Mets and invested in Stretch Armstrong in the 80s and hit it big and started his own toy company. So he did kids' toys and then pet toys. And I came on as a packaging designer for him, and it was like trial by fire.
Yeah.
Thrown in right away. I was working on probably 10, 15 packaging design projects a week. And on top of that, I was working on like the photo side too. So anything that required photos, we would go to the meatpacking district and we would set up photo shoots with photographers. We would have to staff all of the talent and then turn those photos around, edit them, throw them on a package, and send them off to print all within like, I would say 3-4 day turns.
Holy moly.
Yeah. So super quick, and spent a lot of nights like literally until 2 in the morning, like sitting on the windowsill, like working on these designs, stressing my mind like over and over. For Did that for like 3 years. And it was great. Like everything that I did at that place was a new opportunity. He allowed me to do as much as I was able to handle. And there was like nothing again that was like forced on us. We could have like outsourced some of those things, but he allowed us the opportunity to do that. So like I was able to like art direct as like a very junior packaging designer,
Yeah.
which was, fun, exciting, and just opened up like another side of the creative world.
That's amazing. And so you did that from like '05 through '08, around that time frame?
Yep.
And so so the crash hits, and did that job go away, or did you jump to something else?
No, I mean, so I've been super fortunate where like, the economic collapses and stuff have never really affected me. I've always kept like a steady stable of freelance work, but I came out here right after that, 2008. My girlfriend at the time's younger brother was looking at aviation schools, and he was going to Utah, and his mom was like, "Man, I'm not taking you to Utah. So
Yeah.
your sister and Perry can take you out there and chaperone this trip." So we come out here, we hit up Snowbird, Park City, Canyon. It was more of like a snowboard trip for us.
Yeah.
And then we took him to Westminster and Upper Limit Aviation, and I fell in love with it. Like this is like height of snowboarding videos, like Mac Dog movies and stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, Utah is the place. I'm definitely coming out here. And
Right.
Melissa and Kevin were both like, you're crazy. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. So I go back from that trip and I go into David's office, and I was like, I'm moving out to Utah. And he was like, get the F out of here. He's like, you're not going to Utah. And I was like, yeah, I'm putting in my notice. Like, I'm going to Utah. He's like, do you have a job? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm sure I'll have a job. And he's like, well, do you have a job right now? And I was like, no, but I'm putting in my notice. And he's like, you'll be back. Like, mark my words. Like, you're not going to Utah. People don't leave New York to go to Utah.
Yeah.
It's the other way around, bud.
Right.
And I came back out one more time with Melissa like a week after that, in between. Interviewed at a couple places in Park City and Salt Lake, and then the week after that, I packed up my Jeep and drove out here, and I ended up working for D&B Associates at Glenwild, and that was like my start of my Utah career.
Yeah. And so what was that like? What was that transition like from New York to Utah? What were you fell in love with the place, but what did you do here? What was the thing that you loved?
Definitely like the outdoors. Like panic hit when I actually got out here because I didn't know a soul.
Yeah.
I remember that for me was tough. I'm from like a New York Italian family, like we did Sunday dinners every single week with my grandpa, my mom. My grandpa was still around at the time. So I get out here and I moved to Park City right off of Main Street. So it's cold and snowy, and I got a U-Haul packed and it's attached to my Jeep, and I pull up to this like old ski bum shack. Don't know a single person in town, and I'm moving in. There's like a couple ski bums outside crushing beers. They're not asking if I need any help, and I'm moving, hundreds, if not thousands of pounds of thing into the
Yeah.
place. And as I finish unloading everything, like every last piece out with not a single help, the guys were like, "Hey man, do you want to like come by and have a drink?" And I was like, "These guys asking me if I want to come in after they don't give me any help." And I was like, "Yeah, you know what? I'll come in." And I like hang out with these guys, and they kind of like took me under their wing, and we went out to Main Street, got some Fat Kid pizza. There was a place called Sidecar at the time,
Yeah.
and I met a lot of people like one of my best friends, Johnny O, meet him that night. He's actually coming from Denver to our house for Thanksgiving. And like they just took me in right away. So everything we did was like we finished up the ski season. We're snowboarding all the time at Snowbird.
Yeah.
Snowbird was open till July 4th that year, and then got into golf and mountain biking. And like for me, the whole outdoors thing was why I made the move. Like
Yeah.
we were spending ungodly amounts of money driving from New York to Vermont or Hunter every weekend, and it was like crazy. Me, my older brother, girlfriend, her brother, and my younger brother would like travel around. We put like, you know, 5, 6 people in a hotel room for 3 nights, and we would do Jay Peak, Stowe, Killington,
Yeah.
and chase all these storms. And it was nuts. Like we were dumping every penny we made in the office into snowboarding. So for me, I think like subconsciously, it was like, yeah, like I'm gonna trade that for this, and it's like right out my door, and it's way less populated. People are friendly. There's a lot more opportunity. And I feel like I got a solid base from being raised in New York and working in Manhattan,
Yeah.
that set me up for good times out here.
Yeah. So let's get back to the work. What was design like back in '08 here in Utah? What did you find? What were you seeing in the design community here?
Um, it was interesting. So when I was working at Glenwild, it was like a pretty formal like hospitality design. So a lot of marketing collateral. And it was a strong foundation for having like a 9 to 5. I had like one of my early mentors was Damon Rogers. He was the GM there at the time. And he kind of allowed me to do like anything and everything I wanted to do. So I got to focus on the website. I got to do print collateral. Social media was like just becoming big for businesses. So I created all their accounts and got them started in that vein. And then was able to like do a lot of freelance projects on the side. Glenwild being a golf club was very seasonal. So during the winter time, I was able to do freelance projects with like Grenade Gloves or Park City Mountain Resort was one of my bigger clients. I used to do all of their ski maps and like the folded ones and the
Yeah.
ones that are like printed on hill. So there was cool projects like that that were close to home for me in like the snowboarding community. And you know, what was the Gorgoza Pine? So it's now Woodward,
Oh,
but
the
it was
Woodward one. Yeah.
that one too. I got to work on their branding and all their like trail maps and stuff too. So it was a good portion of like a lot of Illustrator and InDesign work for these side projects.
Yeah. And so we first met when you were at Creminelli. So when did you jump to Creminelli?
So Creminelli came a couple years after. So after Glenwald, I went to work for an entertainment producer for a little while.
Okay.
One of the owner of this company was a member at Glenwild, and he kind of plucked me out and took me under his wing. It was really
Okay.
another cool opportunity. I got to work on Mythbusters, Alton Brown's live tour, Mannheim Steamroller, like a lot of cool pieces. And
Yeah.
then from there, I went to Stein Eriksen Lodge, and
Okay.
that was like a really cool storytelling piece for me. Stein was still alive at the time, and Russ Olsen, who's the CEO, gave me bandwidth and freedom to like run with everything. So we created a lot of cool video projects, a lot of photo shoots to be able to tell that story of him being an Olympian, his history with Park City and Deer Valley. And then after that, I landed at Creminelli, which was awesome. Like I almost missed out on that one because the opportunity, when I got hit up by the recruiter, it sounded like too good to be true. They were
Yeah.
like, hey, we can't tell you what company this is, but your job would basically be 50% travel. Like, are you interested in Anthony Bourdain? Like, do you like food travel, traveling
Yeah.
the world, traveling the country? And then they're going through a rebrand right now. They've got like the identity piece 90% done, and they need to do a full rebrand for packaging, website, and social. And I was like, I mean, that sounds amazing.
Right.
And turned out to be these guys at Creminelli. And I remember it was like, everything seems to always work out the way it should. being a kid from New York and like raised in the Bronx with like Italian meats and stuff, I go in for the interview and Cristiano and Jared and Chris lay out like a big plate of charcuterie. And, you know, they
Okay.
probably had so many creatives come in and, you know, fake their way through it. But
Yeah.
for me, like I grew up on gabagool and all this
All
stuff.
that
So
stuff.
I was like in love right away. And I was like, it was probably the first time where I was like, if I don't get this, like I'm gonna lose it. Like this will be one of my biggest regrets.
Yeah.
And it worked out. Me and Cristiano hit it off right away, and Chris, and the same thing. We like dove in head first. We redid all of their packaging. I'm sure you remember
Yeah.
being like local. It was like very old world, brown packaging, and we kind of updated everything to clear packaging for transparency and like a very modern look and feel. And um, you know, those guys were kind of like visionaries in the space where they donate or they used 50% of their packaging on the backside for food travel photography,
Yeah.
which everyone was like, man, you guys are crazy. Like, you're just
Right.
going to put a photo back there. Like, it should be all about brand and you guys want, you know, recognition and all this
Yeah.
stuff. And they just didn't care. You know, Chris and Cristiano were so much into this food discovery idea that it showed up on packaging and everything we did. It was such a cool opportunity and experience for me.
Yeah, the marketing piece that you guys came out with, all the food travel that you did, was such a fun thing to watch from the community, to see where you guys were going and what you were doing. It was an opportunity for us here locally to get to travel with you, if you will. It was a lot of fun. What was the inspiration behind that idea?
So for those guys, it really was food discovery at its core. That was like the big idea that inspired everything we did. But Chris and Cristiano met during the Olympics, and Chris was exposed to Cristiano's food in Torino and was like, man, this stuff is awesome. Like, we don't have anything like this in Utah. Like, have you
Yeah.
ever thought about bringing this to the United States? And he was like, not really. Like, this is kind of his family, you know, owned a Saloon Officio for, I don't know, almost 100 years. So that was kind of just what he did. So a couple years later, he convinced them to come here, open up shop, and they wanted to bring this idea of like good food to the masses. And for them, it was like about democratizing charcuterie.
Yeah.
And it's cool, like, you know, when you're in it at the time, you don't know that you're doing that. And it's funny now to see like the impact that Creminelli has had on, you know, almost the entire country in that space. You can't open up TikTok or Instagram and like not run into a meme about, you know, charcuterie or gabagool,
Right.
all these things that were kind of not really being done at the time, or they were only reserved for dinner parties or, you know, different types of events. And I think that that piece of it, that food discovery and pushing that, is what did that and like democratized charcuterie for the country. Because now you see people, like even in the split board community, people flip over their board and make like a spread now. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's kind of wild, like being a creative director at Creminelli, to then years later see people doing that and making these charcuterie spreads all over the place
Just
now.
everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere. Yeah. And it's like the foodie culture was like another piece of that. Like, I kind of hate the term, but there's no other way to describe it. It really was just about good food. Like, you know, some of the trips were for Cristiano to be inspired by flavors that he would put into the salami, but the core of it was about exposing himself to new culture and immersing himself, not just by like visiting and trying the food, but like meeting the chefs and the artisans behind what was being made, and then doing different activities like in the community, like whether, you know, it was a hike or a tour or snowboarding, mixing it up with locals and like finding out what ignites their passion to learn more and to push him more for the work that he was doing. And I feel like, you know, food's one of those things that's very similar to design. Like, if you're doing it with passion and love, it shows up in the product. And I feel like for him, you know, it does. Like, it tastes so much different than everything else in the market, looks different, and it's just allowed them to be super successful.
Yeah. And from there, you went over to Backcountry, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I went to Backcountry, which was, you know, for me, it was kind of the dream. Like, that
Right.
goat was, since I moved out here, it was kind of the epitome of the outdoors. And my younger brother had worked there early in his career, and it was somewhere where I always wanted to end up. And, you know, stars aligned. I'd done a photo shoot on the talent side the January before while I was still at Creminelli, and I met the creative director, and he wasn't able to be up on Hill, so we were mixing it up on Hill, and I was like working with the photographer to get different shots, and came back, and he was talking to the art director, and he was like, "Man, these are like really cool perspective. Like, I love these angles. Like, this is great. Like, how'd you get this?" And he was like, "I don't want to like take credit." He was like, "John actually helped us with these shots, like while you weren't able to be on Hill." And
Yeah.
he was like, "Who the F is this guy?"
Yeah.
And I end up like cutting it up with him a bit. And he was like, "What do you do? Like, I thought you were just an influencer or a model." And I was like,
That's how
"No."
I think of you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I laughed because I was like, yeah, I was like, I actually, I'm a full-time creative director. Like, I just do the other stuff for fun on the side. And he was like, "We got to bring you on board." And, Creminelli's still at the height of what we were doing. We were traveling 2, 3 times a month, and I couldn't even think about leaving. And then the timing worked out where pandemic hit and all the travel shut down. Like we were supposed to go to Patagonia for a trip with this chef, Sarah Glover, like dream trip.
Yeah.
And they were still gung ho, like nobody knew what was going on yet. We were going to leave. And then the day before the flight, everything got shut down, Utah and Argentina. And that got put to bed. And they called me like a month later, and they were like, "Hey, would you consider coming on with us?" And I decided to take the leap. But we had kind of done the groundwork for everything that we wanted to do at Creminelli from the brand side, and all the content pieces were being put on hold. So like timing couldn't have been more perfect. And um, Backcountry was great. Like we got to dive in and kind of like retell the story of the founders. It's changed hands a couple times, so a little bit of their story and their identity had been lost. So we were able to go back in. There was a CMO there, Sarah Crockett, who was awesome. She gave us like the resources to be able to do all those things. So we got to work with those founders, get their story, put it out like on the website, social media, all of these different touch points, and then got to work. It was about 50-50 with the design team and the content teams to really change the game and start to create unique pieces of content. Some of the work that I've done there is probably like my favorite work that I've done in my career. Like we spent long, long days in the studio, but we would create dimensional lettering out of like real blocks of ice that weighed, 2, 3,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Fill the studio with fake snow. We built a river in the studio one time. Like we were doing all these things that people typically use Photoshop for, and we had definitely had the design muscle to be able to do that, but there was something about like creating these pieces for an outdoor company that were super authentic, that was part of that storytelling. And like I had the honor to work for one of the most talented studio photographers or photographers that I ever worked with, this guy Ben Coons. And
He's great.
yeah, you know him?
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, I mean literally the best technical photographer that I've worked with. And he's become like one of my best friends. But
Cool.
the talent that he possessed and the creative freedom that Sarah gave us opened up so many doors. We were shooting every single day over the weekend. We were traveling, and it was just super fulfilling because the work showed up, and that story started to come back. Because it was interesting. A lot of customers didn't know that Backcountry was started in a garage in Heber with a couple guys selling avalanche beacons.
Yeah.
They just thought it was this massive company. It was this like conglomerate, which isn't the case. It was born in Utah and matured in Park City. So really, really fun work that we got to do there.
Yeah, it's still one of the best direct mail pieces I ever got was one of your catalogs maybe 2 years ago. That first one that I think you put out. Viet was in it. It was that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was that one. It was one of the better direct mail pieces I've ever seen. So
Yeah,
good work.
It's super funny. So, I was telling, like, I was involved in the photo shoot for their first catalog, and the catalog initiatives were huge for them. So as I'm coming on, I'm getting hired as this new guy. I didn't know anybody internally except for my friend Johnny O happened to be there too.
Okay.
So the creative director asked me to come up to Sundance the week before I'm coming on there, and doesn't like, he makes it sound like it's an interview. So I go up there and it turns out it's a photo shoot. So he has me model for this photo shoot, and then he's sending me pieces of the catalog asking for direction and feedback. And there's no cover. So I'm like, yeah, this is cool. We should try this. Like, we should dive into studio photography here.
Yeah.
This is where we need lifestyle. So the week that I get there, a lot of people have been at Backcountry for 15, 20 years, especially my team. So I get there and he puts my face on the cover of this first catalog. So all these guys are like, oh, really? And I remember like Ben and this guy's son, Kim, the first day that I'm there, they had gone through a transition and I'm this new guy that none of them know. They don't know a lot of my experience. And they're like, man, we got to work for this guy that just put himself on the cover of this catalog, and like, what are you going to bring to the table? And I was like, oh, what an interesting way to kick off a new job.
Yeah.
But the catalog work was huge. Like that first year we went from doing 0 catalogs to
Right.
doing 6. And it was a big passion for all of us, like especially the studio side. We were just able to like unlock a lot of doors and showcase product in a way that other brands weren't doing it.
One of the things that I think I've seen a through line as you've talked about your career is such a focus on storytelling, especially about founders and about the reason behind the brand, some of those reasons that you're doing specific things, the realness of the catalogs. Tell me why that you think that's such an important part for a design, such an important part for a marketing or a brand.
Yeah, so I think storytelling is probably the biggest thing that differentiates like a great brand from a good brand. And I think it shows up at every level. But I think for me personally, what I've seen is it helps resonate with people. If you were to ask somebody about Boar's Head, like what would they be able to tell you? Probably like,
I can tell you who owns it.
yeah, right? Like you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
Most people, if you ask them about Creminelli, like they know Cristiano. They
Yep.
feel like they know him from seeing his food travels, and that builds community. It builds brand loyalty, and I feel like it's the biggest game changer. People try and catch that lightning in the bottle with like just good design alone, which you can sometimes, but I feel like that storytelling pushes people over the edge. And, it really goes back to like college for me, the psychology of what gets people hooked into brands. That's the thing. Like you create this personal connection with your audience, and it's something that lasts with them for the rest of their life. Like even if quality falls off sometimes, people will remain loyal to a brand. Even if design goes south for a while under new creative leadership, people are loyal to that brand, and they just know like it's going to come around, and you've got that community backing you. So I feel like from the very beginning, or if you have the opportunity to do like a rebrand, like making sure that you tell that story about what sets you apart from the others is the most important thing you can do as a creative.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned rebrand. So let's get to the big rebrand. So you jump from Backcountry over to, at the time, Lucid Chart? Lucid Press. Lucid Press.
Yeah.
I always get confused which one's which I think is probably part of the rebrand. But so tell me what was the reason to come over? What did they, when did you come over during that rebrand process? And what was it that inspired you to jump to a tech company from your dream job?
Yeah. So I think for me, like anytime you say rebrand, like, kid in a candy shop.
Right.
Having the ability to like have that touch point. But, I did my research, and Lucid Software is a behemoth. Like I think they had a $4 billion valuation as all this was going on. But for me, it was the story. So I started to dive a little bit deeper and look into what Lucid Press was. So Lucid Press was basically, built in the basement of Lucid Software. And the GM of the product was Owen Fuller. So for me, I started doing research. Who's this Owen Fuller guy? I reached out to all my Utah buddies, my buddy Craig Hammond and this guy Treft. And of course, they knew him, and they were like, man, you got to work for Owen. Owen is super connected, like visionary, like it almost doesn't matter what the product is, like this guy is doing stuff. So I was like, yeah, that's a big, bold statement right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me see what it's all about. So I end up interviewing with them, and they go through everything that we're going to work on for the rebrand, which is all dream stuff, right? We get to work on the logo, identity, brand guide, website, and then we get to launch content. And I started talking to Lauren Hamburg, who is the head of product, and we hit it off like right away. I remember, the first time you usually have these 30-minute first touch point interviews.
Yeah.
We were on the phone for like an hour, and then like that wasn't enough time, and we had another hour call, and I could see she was excited about this opportunity, as excited about this opportunity as I was. And for me, I was like, okay, like that's perfect. Like I've got a marketing counterpart that is really excited about telling this story, working through this rebrand the right way, and we're going to hit some aggressive deadlines. And then I had the opportunity to talk to Owen, and Owen was like everything that I had built up in my mind at this point.
Yeah.
So, my buddy Treft is like pretty honest, and he was like, yeah, dude, this guy is sharp, he's connected, and he's fired up about this thing. Like
Yeah.
he's going to make this thing into a billion-dollar brand. And Owen was like super excited about my background, about bringing me on, about this product, like changing the landscape and like owning brand templating. And everyone was just so passionate about it that I was like, yeah, right. Like we've got this story. We've got like, a bunch of genius engineers in the basement of this $4 billion company creating this thing that is able to like then go out on its own, and then we get to rebrand it together and take it out to the masses.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, dream opportunity for me. It's way different than the outdoor space, but like as a creative, it's everything that you could want, everything that you could ask for.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the reasons that they wanted to do the rebrand. What was it that they said, okay, we need to rebrand? Why was it that they felt like a rebrand was necessary? And what were the things that they had found out about that reasons that they knew that a rebrand would address?
Yeah, so I think for Owen, the biggest thing was probably like, the older brother casting the shadow.
Yeah.
So Lucid is a behemoth and
Yeah.
great brands, great products, but it was casting the shadow over us that wasn't allowing us to shine. And we knew that we needed to come into our own and bring it out to the general public in a way that people could digest it, understand what it was a little bit more. Lucid Press wasn't really doing it at the time. Even throughout those 5 years, like things had evolved and changed in the landscape and what the product was doing with brand templating. It didn't really resonate. So it was all those reasons that they wanted to do this, and they wanted to do it on like it was a 1 year timeline, and I came in about like 4 or 5 months into that. So we had basically a half a year to work through some of these things, which is not a lot.
That's not a long time.
Not a long time at all.
Okay, so there were reasons there. So tell me what you found. What was that process that you went through on the rebrand? So did you do customer interviews? Did you do new positioning? Was it really just design, or was it the entire brand strategy too?
Yeah, so it was pretty much the entire brand strategy, right? Like we started at the beginning. We developed product positioning to see like what it was, like what the problem that we were solving for, what our product actually was. That
Yeah.
was like a big thing.
Right.
Throughout the history of Lucid Press, it was kind of pitched sometime as a design solution, which it's not.
Yeah.
It is this brand templating platform that allows brands of all sizes to basically scale content to be able to push it out when you don't have big design team, but you also don't want like your accounting or your HR person becoming a designer.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of like research to kick it off. That was like, we didn't even start to touch logo for, they started that research, 4 or 5 months before I got there. We finished it up with Lauren, and then we started to, research the name, which a lot of people had asked about, and like Marq, like going back to the French term means
Yeah.
brand. And they really liked that. And what Owen and I connected on was all these like hidden meanings and puns and things like that.
Yeah.
Because I always think as part of that storytelling, like hiding little breadcrumbs in your work is something that connects people to you too. So that was something, a lot of tech companies do, like Google or, Prosper. ambiguous names, right? Mark
Right.
can be seen as that, and whatever name we picked, people might have thought that. But for us, we had this root in French meaning for the word brand, and we wanted to build off of that.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do it in a simple, elegant way. I'm sure you're familiar. A lot of people try and over engineer and over design things,
Yeah.
and it blows up. So we really wanted something that was clean, easily recognizable, and have a mark that we could own as part of that process. So after we established the product, the positioning, we dove into the logo work. And it was cool. Like with a smaller team, you never know what the design process is going to look like.
Yeah.
But with Lauren, myself, Owen, and then JP, we kind of ran it like a little creative agency, and we formed like this commission. It was the
Yeah.
four of us just moving things along, making sure we were pushing things in the right direction. And Owen talks about it all the time, like healthy conflict. Like, if something wasn't moving in the right direction, call me out, me and Lauren, back and forth. We would work through it, present something until it got pushed through the way that we were all happy about it and the way that we feel like it would resonate with people. And that continued on. Like, wasn't sure with it being a younger brand if we were going to do like a 3-page brand guide or if we were going to get into the meat of it. And I think we ended up landing at like a 50-something page brand guide. So
Right.
we got into the meat of it.
You send that over to me. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I'll shoot it over to you because it's got the piece of the story. And like, enter the chat. Katie Krongard comes in, and she's our head of content,
Okay.
and she helps with, as I'm sure you're fully aware, the amount of copy that was in the brand guide. Like,
Yeah.
I'm only one man.
Right.
So me, Lauren, we're spewing words onto pages, and it's okay. And the base of the soup is there, but she came in and it kind of like unlocked another door for us overnight. And we got this like amazing copy that was totally matching like the personality and how we wanted to show up. So we got the help that we needed there, and we dug a lot into like, could nerd out on this for probably 6 hours, but spent like probably 3 weeks working on color and palettes. And we ran the gambit, and, without boring anybody listening to death, like that's for us where I feel like, doing a rebrand or design is kind of like a glacier, right? What people see up top,
Yep.
a logo, is just the tip of the iceberg. Like we spent weeks talking about like which colors would resonate with people and how it would make them feel, how it would show up in product, how it would show up on the website, would it work for design, would it work for social media. So we did a lot of research, and it was nice to add a 5th member to the team for the rebrand process, because it helped to push things over the edge and kind of like put the finishing touches that we needed to bring this thing to market. Now, like fast forward, we probably have 2 months left until we're launching.
Yeah.
So deadlines are coming up and expectations are high. So we got the help that we needed to be able to do that.
Tell me, I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of that brand strategy. Did you guys come out with the brand personality? What was that brand personality? What is that brand story? What is that positioning that you guys ended up with?
Yeah, so like I said, they've got a couple ways that Lucid Press was positioned in the past.
Yeah.
So they had it for the individual user for a while, and then where the sweet spot was really as a business solution.
Yeah.
And I think that makes the most sense. And they leaned on me a lot to see like what the creative perspective was.
Yeah.
But our target demographic was basically creative directors, marketing leaders, CEOs, CMOs, depending on the scale of the company. And in the past, it had been pitched to, they ended up getting 6 million individual users that were basically designers or marketers that were trying to use it as like a design tool, which it isn't.
Right.
So that's why we wanted to go back, do all this positioning work to make sure that we were targeting the right people, and to make sure that we developed this brand personality that was like, it basically gave creative empathy and creative trust. Like, bigger brands that have a beautiful identity and logo or whatever the piece is, depending on the scale of the company, like, why should we trust you?
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of a heavy thing. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to develop this brand that allowed those brands to trust us and like grow their brands together. So that was like the meat of what we went into for brand personality and positioning, to make sure that we were targeting the right people and to make sure that we had this creative, trustworthy personality. And for us, it was, you know, not taking ourselves too seriously. We love, like I said, puns and humor, because I feel like for marketers and creative, it's kind of at the root of what we do.
Yeah.
We're good at what we do, but we don't take ourselves too seriously.
Right.
And you know, Katie especially, like, I don't know how much of their marketing or website you've seen, but there's like,
Quite a bit. Yeah.
yeah, there's gold like in those hills.
It's
You find it in emails, social posts, the bottom of like landing pages. And it's cool to see like the customers notice it, you know. Dropping in Albert Einstein quotes or Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, like all these little things that get people excited about the brand as we're starting to tell the story and get people's trust. It's been cool to see that, like, not only do the research for it, but also see that stuff come to life.
Yeah. So, okay, so you're 2 months away, you've got a new identity, new brand, you're starting to work on that. Tell me about the launch. You know, I know that there was a pretty big, you know, rollout to that. What was those last 2 months like?
So the last 2 months, everything was pretty much focused on product rebrand
Okay.
and website rebrand.
Okay.
So you know, massive undertaking.
Yeah.
And it was cool what like B Moss and Wes and these guys and Walker did on the product side, because relatively small team, but product looks beautiful. The user experience is flawless. And everything just looks clean and elegant. Like, beat those words to death, because I feel like major accomplishment, even though that wasn't done in those 2 months, but throughout that time. And then the three of us and Owen worked on the website side to make sure that every touch point, every piece of copy, every page was kind of flawlessly executed alongside with the product team for like the user experience look and feel.
Yeah. And so, that the product, was it more just a reskin of the brand over the top of it, or did they rethink the way that the product worked?
So it was a little bit of a combination of both.
Okay.
The product had been like in a good place. So there was, you know, a lot of times when you do a rebrand with product, people want like a massive overhaul or some
Yeah.
kind of like big upgrade. The product wasn't in need of that, so there wasn't anything that was being rolled out at the time. It was pretty much a reskin
Yeah.
and a cleanup of the existing product,
Okay.
which in itself is still massive undertaking.
Sure. Yeah.
And it looks beautiful compared to, I mean, the old product looked nice too, but the new product looks beautiful.
Okay, so I first saw it. You guys launched at Times Square in New York City. What was that sort of experience like of announcing it there, and how was it received by your customer base and by your now new customers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big thing, right?
Yeah.
Like launching in Times Square and being recognized by Nasdaq. So
Yeah.
for us working on the project, we were like, "Whew, like this is a big moment, better not mess it up."
Yeah.
But like once we got that out of the way, it was a cool opportunity for us. And again, it was something we didn't want to overthink. We didn't want to like, you know, send something out to market that was going to be too complex for people to understand. And it was kind of just a nice pat on the back. So for us, it was Nasdaq congratulating us on this rebrand. So we put out simple messaging and sent people to the website, and we did an animation of our Marq bouncing down the windows. It was one of the most interesting spaces to design into, because this Nasdaq billboard is on the like corner of this real building
Yeah.
that has windows placed throughout it.
Okay.
So Lauren and I did a lot of research, and a lot of brands were like trying to design around that.
Mm.
They would put their logo up in the windows, and you're losing chunks of it. It's almost like a 16-bit design, if you could
Right.
do that. So
Yeah.
like chunks of your logo were losing, and I was like, man, like I don't want to do that. Like, yes, there's a lot of real estate up there, but
Right.
like it's really dead space. So like, how can we play into it? So for us, we had, you know, it was about 1/3 at the bottom that we could really design into and do well. So we did the Nasdaq congratulates Marq on the rebrand, simple, clean messaging, website at the bottom, and we had our Marq bounce down the windows and kind of like kick around like a video game
Yeah.
until it fell into place on the queue. And people received it really well. A lot of people, especially being from New York, that saw that, like my friend group, were super excited. They were like, man, like, how did you guys get up in Nasdaq? And,
Yeah.
you know, my mom saw it, and the billboard next to it was Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans for the Gray Man. She was like, oh man, like you're famous. That's so cool.
Moms are the best.
Yeah. She's always been ridiculous over the years too. Cause like used to do Broadway stuff, and
Yeah.
the billboards would go up, and some of the stuff we were presenting and some we produced from the ground up. So some of the stuff I actually designed, but
Yeah.
she like, if I would put together a piece for like Wicked, I
Yeah.
didn't design that. My
Right.
mom's like, oh, everybody, like, look at this piece that my son designed. It's up in Times Square and it's Wicked. I'm like, Mom, I didn't design the Wicked logo. But yeah, she was like over the top ecstatic about the Marq billboard being up there. And then the customers too. Like we got tons of emails from people just like, you know, great billboard, awesome visibility, love the rebrand, which like segues into the rebrand response, because you never know how
Never
that's
know.
going to be received, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of the biggest things you could do. It's always a gamble. And people were ecstatic, and we were, you know, you kind of get burnt out towards the end. So like Owen, Lauren, JP, myself, Katie, we're all burnt out. Like we'd seen Marq everywhere, you
Yeah.
know, thousands of iterations of things, and to like see through social media and emails people flood in about how excited they were about like the product relaunch and the rebrand was really cool. And then for it to coincide with that like Nasdaq billboard in Times Square, like kind of picture perfect.
Yeah. From the outside, you know, it was really clarifying about who you were as a company, and so you know, super successful from my vantage point about what you were trying to do. It makes what Lucid, which was little ambiguity, whatever that word is. There's a lot of ambiguity around whatever Lucid was doing, and now that Marq has its own sort of entity and its own sort of company. Now it's a lot more clear about what you're doing, and super successful. Very, very, very good job.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that was like the biggest piece, was making sure that customers, current and future customers, like knew what we were doing, and it was cool. Like it's cool to hear you say that, and it was cool to hear the customers say that, because there's people that've been with us for a long time that love the product, but the brand for them was kind of like a miss.
Yeah.
And for us to come into our own, nail that, and have people be excited about it was super fulfilling for like the entire team. And like, you know, for us, like being a startup, the whole company, like everybody played a part there.
Yeah.
Takes an army.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, okay. So, give me a little bit, you know, a couple more questions, and then we'll get to our favorites about the restaurants that we need to eat at. So, what I'd love to hear from you as a sort of, you know, as a real senior creative director here in the Valley, you know, what are some things that young designers and people who are just getting started in the community can do to make their work better?
Yeah. So, you know, I'm super old school. And I also, you know, I mix it up in the social media world and try and stay current on everything. I think the biggest piece of advice I could give people is just like try and savor the moments you have as a designer and learn as much as you can. I think from what I've seen now, everybody wants to jump ahead so quick.
Yeah.
You know, junior designers, they want to be a creative director right off the bat. Like
Right.
I've had it with direct reports over the years where someone comes out of college, they're in a design seat for 6 months, and we're checking up on like goals, and they want to be a creative director by the end of the year.
Right.
And there's just so much, like there's so much beauty in the process that makes you who you are as a creative, that like you can't skip that piece. You
Yeah.
know, like I was talking about earlier, when I went on as like internships and when I worked with photographers, there's just so much that you learn throughout that process that there's nothing you can do to skip the line. You've just got to you've got to love what you do. You've got to be involved in the process, and you've got to like take on as much as you can and learn from all those great people. Like not everybody that I learned from was my favorite person, but everybody that I've worked with is somebody that I've learned from. And every job gives you that opportunity to learn. So like for any designer, man, I would just say like enjoy the time you have as a designer because you're really like you're doing the thing. Like you have the
Yeah.
opportunity to create and you've got the opportunity to mentor or, you know, to work alongside a lot of talented people and to learn as much as you can. Like it just gives you like the way I like to think about it is like a tool belt, right? Like
Yeah.
when you're fresh out of college, maybe you have two brushes in that tool belt. And then, you know, after 2 years, maybe you've got 15, 20 tools that you can use really well. And I think if people stop, slow down, focus on that process a little bit, it just helps you be a better creative and it sets you up for success. Like you can watch and see how people manage design teams, creative departments, what works, what doesn't work, um, and really just be like a student of your craft.
Yeah. No, I guess my other question would be, you're working in this space where you're dealing, as a creative director, you're dealing a lot with marketers and you're putting out marketing and some really great marketing over the years. Tell me from your perspective how a marketer could utilize and what they should understand about what a creative director is trying to do. How can they make the marketing better and how do they work with that creative director better?
Yeah. So I think for that, like the way you've got to think about it is I can't remember who I got this term from, but considering those people in your professional life as business partners is the best way to think about it. You know, you like a lot of times marketing is pitched against creative, creative's
Yeah.
pitched against marketing. But at the end of the day, like if you've got a great relationship and you work together well as business partners, you can put out the best pieces. And I feel like the way I want marketers to think about creative directors is just that, like a business partner. Like you can't make great creative without having a good relationship with your creative team and making sure that you're focused on those good things. Like one of the things that I see all the time for marketers is like quick turns and you know they want things to pop, right? They're trying to sell something, whether it's a product, a service, or hard or soft goods. And you know, you go back to a good design being rooted in storytelling and you've got to educate them, right? So when I was younger in my career, it was kind of stomping my feet on the ground and just being like, this is a great design. Like,
Yeah.
send this out into market. Like, what are you guys,
Right.
dum-dums? You don't understand this? And that obviously doesn't work, right? So
Right.
taking the time to teach marketers creative empathy and also having, you know, empathy for what they do too. Like, everybody is in their role for a very valid reason. Everybody's good at what they do. And taking time to learn about your business partners, what they do, what they're trying to accomplish, instead of just jumping into something and trying to make it look pretty, I think is the biggest thing that I love for, you know, my business partners that I've had over the years. Hopefully they've seen that with me and it's something that they take with them through the rest of their careers. Because I feel like when you develop that relationship, when you develop that trust, and when you're putting brand and your common goals above everything else, you make magic.
Yeah.
When you're trying to butt heads and fight creative versus marketing, nothing works.
Yeah.
Timelines get dragged out, deadlines get missed, and oftentimes the creative just doesn't work, right? Like it
Right.
shows up.
Yeah. There's no vibe to it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's like one of the biggest things. It is real. It's hard to explain because it is kind of like this esoteric idea, right?
Right.
Like a vibe and a design or like
Yeah.
a piece of marketing collateral, but like, you know, you pour blood, sweat, and tears into work and it shows up. Like those
Yeah.
catalogs, like that to me makes my heart smile
Yeah.
because Ben and I poured blood, sweat, and tears into those catalogs when we could have phoned it in, you know, we could have not worked with Sarah, but like we spent weeks and months working on every catalog to like make sure that you know, Sarah and Matt could give us the consumer insights that we needed to figure out what would resonate with those people, how it would show up, like what image goes, like all of these things that no one cares about, but you see something is either a good design or a bad design. It either is or it isn't, and that's that vibe, right?
Yeah.
Like something that's soulless usually doesn't have that vibe,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
And a lot of times you don't get to hear about like what the soul is that goes into the project, but you know, and I know there's a rich backstory behind every great design, every website, every photo, that people are so passionate that it shows up and it resonates with you for a reason.
Yeah. If it's good, somebody cared a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's get to restaurants. Where should somebody eat, drink, or get a coffee around this town?
Well, you know what I'm going to say here.
Yeah.
Pretty Bird. Pretty Bird's like one of my favorite spots in town. Chef Viet Pham is.
Which is your favorite space?
Oh, man. So he's like another one, like the brand work, the design that goes into all of them. Sugar House is pretty awesome. The OG spot downtown is pretty amazing. Have you been up to the Park City location?
Love the Park City location a lot.
They're all like
They're all different.
they're all different.
Yeah, which I love.
Yeah, they've all got that through line with the great brand work, and I know you've had some touch points with them.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that makes your heart smile a little bit.
Yeah, love it.
His food's great. Like everybody should try it. Like I know Nashville Hot Chicken's got like one of those connotations where it's like, ooh, I don't like spicy, but they make something for everybody at every spice level. And then, man, I've like transitioned out of the coffee space. I've turned into like a at-home coffee head.
Yeah.
Man, so many good food spots. Osteria Amore is probably
Where's
one.
that? Is that the one over on 13th?
Yeah, it's over in Sugar House.
Yeah.
But really great pasta, Italian dishes, which has a special place in my heart.
Yeah. All right. Recommending an Italian place. You
Yeah.
know it's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. What about bar? Where can I find you getting a drink these days?
Oh man, my guys at the Alibi. Alibi Bar is one of my favorite places. You know, the other thing that is extremely rooted in my personality and has given me like the work ethic of drive is like coming up in restaurants and bars. And I bartended with those guys, Jacob and Fernando at OP Rockwell when they were launching.
Yeah.
And they make amazing cocktails. Central 9th, have you been there?
Have you been to their new space over on?
So I haven't been to the new spot, but Central 9th is Ben Kuhn's brother, Noah, and they are doing some fantastic stuff with food. So family home evening, Monday nights.
Okay.
Amazing smash burgers.
I haven't been there on. I've heard that it's good, but I haven't been.
Oh, you got to go.
Okay.
Monday night is great because you can do the burgers over at Central 9th, and then you go next door and you get your cocktails at Water Witch. And there's a couple guys that do fantastic tiki drinks, and they're just like delicious, the depth. And, you know, these are, I can't remember the two guys' names. They're super close with Ben. So,
Scott and I forget the other guy's name. Yeah, Scott.
But Island Time, is that their,
Yeah.
so they've got like a side project that they do, but the drinks show up there and they're always doing something unique and interesting. And I love it.
Yeah.
I love both of those places. The Sando, like the breakfast Sando at Central 9th, the sandwiches, like those guys are just passionate about food and experimenting and trial and error. They just like, they really care about it. They use like locally sourced, like really awesome ingredients. And then who doesn't want to go get a cocktail after you've had a nice savory little smash burger?
Have you been to Nome next on the other side there?
Is Nome the new spot?
It's the old spot. Anyway, we can talk about it another time.
Is it bar or is it
it's a restaurant. It's that fish restaurant.
Like Vietnamese or Japanese? Yeah.
Japanese.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't been over there.
Oh, it's my favorite in the city, man.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's for real good. Yeah. Okay. All right.
I'm gonna have to get over there.
Yeah. Well, let's go grab a drink.
Yeah, I love that.
All right. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you out in town.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Bye. By Subjects is a production of Modern 8 Agency in Silicon Slopes. Executive producers are Alicia Smith and Peter Stevenson. Editor and producer is Dave Meekum. Video production by Connor Mitchell. Development production by Eric Dahl. Production management by Shelby Sandlin. Original music composed by Josh Johnson. Website designed by Modern 8. Please make sure to follow and share the show with your friends and your enemies. Thanks for joining us.